Hello and welcome to the Pots and Trowels podcast with me, Martin, Jill and Sean.
Hi.
Hiya.
And in a few minutes I'm going to be chatting to Charlie Gwynne, who's one of the show organisers of the Malvern flower shows.
And we're talking about the brutal sport of growing giant veg, finding out a little bit more about that and talking about some world records. And also, Martin, we've got some listeners' questions as well that we're going to answer.
Fabulous stuff. But first, let's go over to Malvern and meet Charlie. Charlie, you're here at the Malvern Flower Shows, where you're one of the show organisers of the spring and the autumn show. But before you came here, your background is horticulture, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I actually come from a commercial growing background, but before that I actually worked in practical conservation. I come from a green-fingered family, but moving from practical conservation to private client work, gardening, and then later as a crop technician. My last growing contract before I worked here was actually for Chelsea Flower Show, which was a prestigious event, of course, that everyone knows about, but it was a wonderful experience and sort of led me into the world of shows.
So was that working on a commercial nursery and you were growing plants on contract for one of the gardens at Chelsea?
That's right. So at the time I was working with quite a small setup, actually, smaller than where I trained, and it was all herbaceous stock that I was working with, and yeah, we were supplying a lovely show garden on Main Avenue.
So when you're doing something like that, I mean, I know that the show garden designers buy the plants in. How long in advance, how far in advance do you get to know? It's got to be quite a while because you've got to source the material, propagate it and grow it on to a show quality.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, most show gardens at Chelsea have been accepted 2 years in advance, so they have some time to look at options, but at least 12 months really. A good growing cycle for most of it is what you're looking at. It was a mix of things that we propagated in-house, sown seed and bought in and divided, so it was a group effort really, but to get the quality that you're looking for a Chelsea garden, you have to search far and wide.
Yeah, I bet, because they often want things that are a bit unusual and a little bit different, so a lot of sourcing to do on that, isn't there?
Absolutely. The garden I was working on is a lot of British native plants, and there's not that many nurseries growing them. I think the garden itself promoted the sourcing and sale of British native plants as well, but behind a lot of show gardens is a message, and that's why you get sort of into that more detail and intricacy of sourcing the more unusual things.
And what tends to happen with the plants? I mean, obviously they leave the nursery, they go there. Do you get involved with planting them on the gardens, or do they deal with that themselves?
So it just depends on the team, but if you're lucky you will be invited to do a bit, but it's such a high stakes scenario. It's not like planting a usual contract. It is a bit more special, so they like to have the sort of final say, but some of the team will let you put a few in, I'd say, but they want the ultimate creative decision.
Yeah, but I suppose when they go from the nursery it's a bit like saying goodbye to them, isn't it? Then
my
you're never
goodness.
going to see them again.
Absolutely, it is literally like saying goodbye to your children. You've kept an eye on them. Some of them I whipped in and out of the polytunnel, I couldn't tell you how many times. It's getting them all at that perfect stage that they want to represent at the same time is
Right.
quite something, especially if you're trying to trick things into flower, which is often the case that time of
exactly.
year.
Yes, it is to get them ready for May. So yeah, a lot of juggling around, isn't there? So did you more or less know from leaving school that you wanted to work land-based, horticulture, conservation, that type of thing?
I've always been really outdoorsy. I'm a country girl and I live only just over the Malvern Hills from where we're stood here. Always been interested in the outdoors, but if I'm honest with you, at school it's not an avenue that you're encouraged into. I actually thought I'd probably be a vet when I was at school, and it was only changing my A-levels last minute from chemistry to environmental science that opened my eyes up to all the land-based careers that are out there.
So we ought to explain, we are standing on the Malvern Showground at the moment in Worcestershire, which is a beautiful showground because the backdrop is the famous Malvern Hills, which are iconic, aren't they? And you can see them when you get off the motorway, the M5, then there they are in the distance. And I've always been this side, so we are to the east, aren't we, of the Malvern Hills, this ridge of hills. I've always wanted to know what it is the other side. I've got this picture of a bit like Lord of the Rings where they're looking out into the mid-shires, is it? It's just, I would imagine, just fields, a tapestry of fields.
It absolutely is. If you're up on that top ridge, as you look across, you can see all the way to the Brecon Beacons, you can see some high points like the Sugarloaf and the Skirrid over in Abergavenny, so it really is quite something. It's a very beautiful part of the world to live in.
It is, exactly. So obviously your job here is still involving horticulture in a way, but outside of work, have you got a garden?
I absolutely do. I'm mainly container based. I'm probably going to move house again, but I can't live without my plants. I don't come with much baggage, but about 2 trailers worth of plants is what I've come with. A lot of them are specimens I've collected over the years from jobs I've been working on. A lot of them are things that were not quite perfect enough for sale that have come home with me. It's like a rescue centre, really.
Okay, so sort of a container garden, so if you do move, you just stick them in the back of a van and
Absolutely. It's taken 2 high top Sprinter vans to move last time.
go. Oh right, okay, it's a lot of containers.
It's a lot of
isn't it?
containers.
Yeah, it probably takes more to move that than your clothes.
Oh, absolutely. I'm much more interested in buying trees and plants than clothes.
And you like house plants as well, don't you?
Absolutely. They're a little bit more tricky to move around, particularly in the winter. You've got to give them what they want. Some of them won't really drop below sort of 9 degrees. But yeah, I've got lots of house plants, an ever-growing collection. But that's something that's come to me later, actually. I've never really... It's not something when you train, it's not as talked about. But that's something that's grown actually through this job, seeing the growers here and getting more inspired.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it is. And one of the things you've been doing at the show, apart from your normal job here, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes' time, is you've been joining us on the stage for the Q&A sessions. How did you find that?
Oh, it's so much fun. I love it. I mean, I get to work with you, Martin, of course, and also John Wheatley on the stage. But it's so great because it's sort of putting you on the spot, really. You never know what the public are going to come. You can't prep for it. There's no textbook for how to do a Q&A. But no, it's really good fun. And it's so great for me, as a sort of someone who's involved in the show organising, to find out what people really are looking for and what their questions are. So it's almost like a poacher term gamekeeper, really.
Yeah, and it's quite good having you with us because John and I are quite a lot older than you, and it's nice to get a younger take on things as well. But today I think we've had a lot of weeds, haven't we? Really?
We have. It's not been quite as jolly as sometimes we get lovely questions like, what kind of tree can I plant here? And you can list off some beautiful different species and varieties. But no, it is really good. Obviously, the core fundamentals of horticulture hasn't changed, but I think the way we've all been taught, well, I've trained at Pershore College not too far away, has changed over the years. And it's interesting that asking the questions being asked to us brings that out, how our training's differed.
Yeah, well, especially when we've got people like John Wheatley with us, who's about 107.
I believe so. I think he was actually there at the birth of horticulture.
He was, exactly.
I hope he listens to it.
So it's good to have you with us. Right, well, it's getting a bit windy here, so what we'll do, we'll move out the wind a little bit and then we'll catch up with you a bit later on.
Perfect, thank you.
Windy, where Martin is, I can't believe it. Oh, sorry.
It was a bit.
We're talking of W words, weeds. You mentioned you get a lot of questions about weeds. Is that just a time of the year thing?
Yeah.
I think it is. We often at the end of the season get people asking about weeds because they've obviously had a problem with them all through the summer.
It's always a bit of a toss-up though, which is the weed of the show.
It is,
because a couple of the last shows that we've done, it was all about ground elder, which of course we suffer from dreadfully. But this one, it was mare's tail.
Mare's tail and bindweed, wasn't
Maybe
it?
we should have a section of the podcast called Weed of the Week.
We could.
Yes.
Yes, we could.
Well, okay, we'll start that next week then.
Yeah.
Well, strange you should say that because last week I was at a meeting with the RHS talking to the president, who is called Keith Weed, and he said we could do a little interview with him at one point as well, so we could have a weed special.
Yeah. But no one's ever made that joke before.
No, I bet they haven't.
No, he just lived with that. I mean, what a career to go into. Anyway, that's a completely different conversation, isn't it? Charlie sounds great, doesn't she? I love the idea of preferring to go out and buy trees and plants over clothes. Quite a bit more sustainable, I guess.
Yeah, she is a very down to earth. She says a country lass. And she just loves her job. She's so good at it as well.
Yeah.
We deal with her for both shows, the spring show and the autumn show at Malvern, and she's just into it in a big way, loves it.
Fantastic.
But she's done the event side as well. So, as well as the horticulture, then she's got both hats. I always, when I introduce her on stage, I always kind of say, well, she's got 2 hats, and this hat is the gardening hat.
That's
so
right. And she loves being on the stage as well. I think she was a little bit nervous the first time she did it last year, but now she's done it for 3 shows with us. She's sort of into it now. She's elbowing me and John on the other. She sits in the middle and she elbows it out the way.
Well, she just mentioned, and there's obviously that mention of kind of the difference in training over kind of some of the old guard, if you pardon me saying it like that, and perhaps the new guard coming through. John, who's John then?
John Wheatley is one of the senior RHS judges, and he's a general gardening expert. create show gardens. We're going to have a chat to him next week.
Brilliant.
He's he's a great chap. I've worked with him for a long time. Very well known in the horticultural trade in the UK.
Fabulous. And just to say, for those of you listening on the podcast and not watching on the video on YouTube, because we're now doing these as video, I have to mention this because Martin sort of smirked. Something fell down and out of the way of the blind and meant that Martin got covered in white dots. Oh, you put some tape up. Okay, so apologies.
Technical.
It was tape over the little string holes in the Venetian blind, and it fell off.
All right. Well,
I thought we'd covered that really well. Not covered the holes. I thought we'd covered the noise.
Well, we did
really
for the podcast, but anybody who's watching the video will have seen Martin just laugh when this noise happened, and the lights. Anyway, so sorry if you're listening to this, that doesn't make much sense to you. But anyway, just a quick reminder, if you've got a question for the team, we're going to answer some listeners' questions in a bit. But if you've got a question for the team, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com. And I can do that without even looking at my notes now.
Very good.
Have
Said
to
it a
keep
few
it
times.
Absolutely. So have we got any questions for me this week?
We have, yes.
Yeah. Shall I start? We've got one
you
here.
start.
That somebody's asked on the video about planting spring cabbage. They've asked, will you be doing a follow-up video for this? I'm a bit concerned mine aren't doing very well. What should spring cabbage look like right now?
Well, better than mine, to be fair.
So yours aren't doing very well either.
They were doing brilliantly. We sowed them, if you remember, about a month ago, something like that, back in early August, into little modules with the view to planting them out mid-October. And these are then going to overwinter, and we'll get these lovely fresh greens, these small, soft-hearted cabbages next March, April, May time. That's how it works. But they were doing really well in the greenhouse, and then we were away working at a show, got back, and some cabbage white butterflies had got into the greenhouse, and the caterpillars had hatched, tiny little green caterpillars, and had a bit of a munch. So I've got rid of the caterpillars, I've squashed them all, and they are growing again, but it's set them back a little bit. But yes, to answer your question, we will hopefully do a follow-up video. It's going to be a few weeks sort of into October, and we'll plant them out, so we'll show you. So don't worry if yours are a little bit behind. There's still time for them to catch up. Just keep them watered, bit of feed maybe, and that will bring them on ready for going out into the garden.
So when do the cabbage whites stop being active?
I think more or less now. I think we got the last flutter of
Right.
butterflies in there about
just
3
saw some
weeks ago.
tender
Yeah, and
new
they got
green.
in the greenhouse, couldn't get out, and thought, oh look, there's a little cabbage
Yeah.
there, we'll eat that.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
Pesky
okay.
loving things.
Right. We've got a couple of comments about the geraniums, the Pelargonium video that you did. And we've got one that says, I remember what you told us about how to overwinter the geraniums. I follow those steps and saved all of them. Put them in a shed that has a window. I've also trimmed down 5 of them and placed them in the front porch, but I'm not sure whether that's a good idea because it's a window that is south facing. Will they be okay?
I think that will be fine through the winter because, bear in mind these are South African plants, and they love warmth, and the sun isn't as hot or as intense through the winter months, so that will be absolutely fine. They'll do well in that situation.
Okay.
And just bear in mind the ones in the shed, if it does turn really frosty, just put a bit of fleece over them just to give them that little bit of protection. It doesn't matter for a week, even if they're covered in a couple of layers of fleece, it won't kill them. It will protect them from the frost.
Okay, and there's another comment, just somebody saying, is this the same for geranium? So there's that usual quandary of geranium, pelargonium. Are they the same thing? What's the difference?
Yes, I mean, what we call geraniums that we put out in the summer in containers, they are pelargoniums.
Yeah.
It's geranium is a sort of a Victorian name for them, but you mustn't get mixed up with the hardy geraniums that we plant in our herbaceous borders that die down in the winter. They're totally frost hardy and they grow back. They tend to have pink or blue flowers, so they look very, very different. But yes, what we call geraniums in a garden centre or nursery for the summer can be treated. They are the same, essentially.
Okay.
And you just reminded me there that the most recent video is a masterclass in I can't say it. Narines. And they're also South African. Is there kind of a theme here? Are we bidding for some kind of South African tour? Is that the next?
Well, yes, to go to South Africa. No, we just, a lot of the plants that we grow in the UK are either from the Americas, or South Africa, or Asia. They're the three main, Australasia really, I suppose, all over the world. But yes.
So I guess our great gardeners of the past went on their travels. They went plant hunting, didn't they? And came back with these.
them.
Yeah, and the best ones have survived, or the ones that could adapt to our climate have survived.
And the rest we'd grow as glasshouse plants or indoor plants.
Or house plants. Coming up later, we're going to, coming up in the next part, we're going to hear about Charlie's job and also gigantic vegetables, I believe.
Huge.
Yes, giant veg.
Reminds me of the marrow we had on last week, of course. Jill?
How did you get on?
So I took a marrow home, and I'm showing the video now. Here's a piece of cake that I made with it.
That
marrow
looks delicious.
Marrow and almond. There's not much of it left.
So the almonds, did you put ground almonds in there, or?
No, so it was actually a marrow and pecan cake. It didn't have any pecans, had every other ingredient in the cupboard already, so I thought I can't bother going to the shop. So I switched out for almonds, but I just smashed them with a rolling pin, which perhaps I should have chopped them rather than smashing them with a rolling pin, because they're rather large. Anyway, to cut a long story short, so I made the cake, that was brilliant, and then I had to work out what to do with the rest of the marrow, the other 3/4 of the marrow. And I tried to make some fritters, which weren't very successful. So let's just leave that at that.
But that's the problem with marrows, because they've got a lot of moisture in there, haven't they? So when you did the cake, did you grate the marrow and then sort of squeeze it dry?
Yeah. So with the cake, I squeezed it with a cloth, and then when I did the fritters, I did the same thing. I grated it and I squeezed it, but I tried to use a sieve, and that method didn't work very well. Or I did too much at once. Sorry, this has switched into kind of cookery problem corner.
That's fine.
It's the weeds of cooking. So I didn't get enough moisture out of the fritters, so they were just a bit of a mess on the frying pan. I tried.
It is a very, very wet flesh in a marrow, isn't it?
It is.
But we've been using, I say we, the royal we. You've been cooking with butternut squashers at the shows, haven't you?
I have.
And made fritters, and they've worked really well.
They did, because they haven't got the moisture content, obviously, so you can just grate those and then use them straight away. So it's a bit of flour and egg, and then some cheese to bind it all together. And then Sean's just tucking into some of his marrow cake here. It looks delicious, very tasty. It's going to make you cough, though, now, Sean, isn't it?
That's why he didn't come to do this with us in the garden today, isn't it? Because he'd only got one slice left.
So I put some sage in there, and then a bit of chilli as well, just to spice it up a little bit. Blend that all together, and then you just use, I think I used a 1/4 cup measure, and then just fried those off. And they worked really nicely.
Really good.
And you made a bit of a sage dip, didn't you?
I did, yes. Yeah, it was some Greek yogurt. So just ordinary Greek yogurt that you buy. We got a few sage leaves, and I chopped them really, really finely, mixed them in with a little bit of runny honey as well, and a little bit of olive oil, just to sort of smooth it round a little bit. And that was a really, really delicious dip that you could use with anything. I'm going to get into the cookery thing.
Well, I'll put a link on the website, on the notes to our website, and then the recipe's on there.
Is that Marley we can hear?
Yeah, Marley just had a little bit. I think the postman must have arrived, because he's gone to full attention. He was lying sleeping on my foot, and now he's jumped up, full alert. I haven't got a camera for Marley. Sorry, I'll try and drop a photo of him later.
He's on guard duty. Good lad.
Anyway, thinking about those marrows, let's go back to pumpkins, because I think Charlie was chatting about the pumpkins and the giant veg at the show.
So your job here at the Three Counties showground is, what is your official title? In fact, you tell me. Yes, I'm not going to guess.
It's a little bit long. It sounds a bit posh, but I'm a shows and horticulture executive. I'm the only one. I'm sort of got the most formal training, if you like, not to blow my own trumpet, in the team in actual horticulture. And it's very, very, very diverse. So for the spring, I oversee the show gardens. So from giving advice on the application all the way through to completion, and I'm there on this normally tends to be a little bit soggy breakdown days of the show garden itself. That's a really interesting process. I meet all sorts of designers, the build teams, the planting teams. It really is seeing it from the idea conception all the way through to execution. And do you know what? They become part of the family. seeing the medals being handed out. In fact, they actually let me hand some out this year.
Wow, good.
And it's like giving sort of a friend really the best gift you could ever give them if you hand over a gold medal. And it's really, really emotional, but that's one really lovely element of my job. Other than that, I deal with all the special guests, booking in some of the lovely, obviously your good self, Martin, in fact. And some of the other fantastic horticulturists we book in as well to speak on our stages. And even things like signage. I work across a lot of print and signage requests.
Yeah, so you get to see sort of a cross-section of how the show's put together. And I think it's really good, Charlie, that as one of the show organisers, they've got somebody with a horticultural background, because, you know, lots of show organisers don't. They're brilliant at organising events, but I think that horticultural background brings something a little bit special and different, and you know, you're in contact with things. And I would imagine it is amazing seeing the designs and seeing them through the construction, and then, you know, waiting for their award is quite a special thing to
absolutely.
be involved
And of course
with.
we actually know a little bit before, well, actually about a day ahead, we tend to know what's going to happen, so you're sat on this massive secret. And in fact, I pretty much will turn the other way if I see a designer, so they can't read my face, because I'm terribly expressive of my face, I can't lie. So if I see them coming, I'll turn around if we're about to give out the awards, because I think they know that.
I know the feeling, because obviously I judge in the floor marquee, and then I'll see the exhibitors and they don't get to know for a day after. And you've just got to be very careful what you say, not let
very
anything
neutral
slip.
on everything, but it is a lovely thing.
So that's the spring show and the autumn show. The spring show is in May, and then it's straight on to getting ready for the one in September, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
So because of my involvement with the show gardens and how long that takes, so applications for show gardens actually closed just this week, so I'm already very much into that now. We literally turn around in the end of May and get straight onto, we have already started the bulk of the planning by then for the autumn show, but I do often get sort of comments like, oh, what do you do for the rest of the year? We're a really small team, and it does take the full sort of 12 months to plan an event like this, and always thinking of new fresh content. Particularly over the winter, we'll be looking at the trends coming up and seeing where the visitors' sort of appetite is, what sections. For example, we've picked up a lot, there's a lot more thirst for knowledge in the growing your own section and how to use what you're growing as well. So this year at spring we introduced the kitchen garden theatre, which was really, really popular, and probably coming back, I would like to say, a little bit of a spoiler there, but possibly even in an even bigger capacity.
Good. Oh, that's good. Because people are hungry for information at shows, aren't they? I know when we're doing talks, they always want to know things and how to do it, and practical things that sometimes, you know, you're in horticulture and we take for granted. But sometimes people, if they've never gardened before, simple things like sowing seed and taking cuttings is something that gets them started.
Absolutely. We try and get that mix from, everyone likes to hear a lovely glamorous story from a TV celeb about the telly. Everybody likes a little bit of that, but there is always every year fresh new gardeners coming in that haven't possibly even sown a seed ever before. And that's where our practical stages, like the potting shed and tips and tricks there, to come in, where there's practical advice from really good horticulturalists that, you know, take away. I mean, it's amazing, the audience that are actually taking notes during the talks to take home and have a go is just lovely, really.
I've noticed the way that some people do it now, and it's changed over the years. Instead of, some do take notes, you're right, but some people just video it all now on their phone.
Yeah, I think how many phones you live on, Martin, forever and ever. They must be everywhere. But that's the beautiful thing. Photographs, taking photographs and being inspired from the shows is you can see it all the time. It's taking away those ideas, and that's show gardens as well, a really good example of that. Planting schemes, colour schemes you might not have thought of. You can capture them and look at them later date.
Absolutely, yeah. So here we are. It's a bit of a windy day today, the last day of the autumn show. So this has got a very different feel to it than the spring, hasn't it? Because no show gardens here, but an awful lot of horticulture as well.
It's some amazing plant villages, bulb markets, the floral marquees looking, I think the standard in there is absolutely exceptional. I'm sure you agree. And behind us here, from where we're stood, is the Harvest Pavilion, where the Grow to Show, which is the amateur showing of fruit and veg classes. I mean, some of those are absolutely exceptional, but we've had a lot of coverage this time, and as we often do, in the giant vegetable tent, was just over the way from us. We've had 13 Guinness World record-breaking entries this year, and the UK's biggest pumpkin.
All right, can you remember what the weight is?
I absolutely can't, Martin.
It's big, though,
but
isn't it?
I tell you what, I'm not picking it up. That's all I know.
I think you could hollow it out and more or less live in it.
Absolutely.
No, it is amazing. So it's all coming to an end now. So you'll be starting to plan now, ready for spring. Hopefully, you might get a chance for a bit of a holiday, go home and water your house plants and that type of thing. Do you know the dates of the Spring Festival?
So it's the 8th to the 11th of May next year. Tickets will be on sale very, very soon. Certainly before Christmas. A wonderful Christmas present, may I add.
Absolutely,
I would say.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful show. It is, and with those beautiful hills there at the back, what better setting.
It really does kick off, I think, for me. I'm obviously slightly biased. It kicks off the horticultural show calendar. You're at the forefront. If a trend's set at Malvern Spring Show, it can carry on.
It can, and I always think that the Malvern Spring Festival, we should officially say the RHS Malvern Spring Festival, although you're organising it, I think it's sort of a warm-up for the Chelsea Flower Show, because the exhibitors that will be here in the floral marquee just 2 weeks later will be at the RHS Chelsea Flower Show, so this is a bit of a warm-up for them, I think.
I think you can really, I'm sure you can feel it as well, Martin. There's just a slightly more relaxed atmosphere at the autumn show in the floral marquee. We've been through all the judging from all the other RHS shows as well, and everyone's a little bit more relaxed, but it definitely is. It's a great warm-up to Chelsea at the end of the month.
It is, jolly good. Right, well, we better let you get on because you've got a busy afternoon. It's going to be breakdown soon. So, Charlie, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
Those giant veg were just incredible, weren't they? They really were. Just, yeah. I mean, and there were two kind of areas of the fruit and veg celebrating the harvest, because as Charlie said, Malvern is such a lovely show and it's so relaxed and it's really celebrating the harvest. So we were there with the potting shed stage in the Harvest Pavilion, which is where the amateur growers have all their displays. And I think on the video that's just gone out this week, the Pots and Trowels video, there are probably some shots of all the fruit and veg, aren't there? On there.
Absolutely.
But then there's the giant veg. I was going to say guys, but it's not. So there's a lot of women growing in there as well. And the pumpkin that Charlie referred to, I did a little bit of Googling on the Malvern Autumn Show website, and the pumpkin that won was grown by twin brothers Ian and Stuart Payton, and their pumpkin weighed in at 1,198.2 kilograms, which translates to 2,641 pounds.
Wow.
Or 188 stone.
Yeah,
I'm
12 stone 1. I've lost a couple of pounds.
Have you? Oh, good.
I'm 12 stone 1, so it's a lot of me's.
It is a lot of views, and
I'm flabbergasted. Sorry, I'd written down here
I know.
Cinderella, but
they are huge. I mean, it's over a ton in weight.
They live in Hampshire, and they had to drive this pumpkin up to the show. And apparently, when they're driving up the motorway, people were leaning out of their car windows taking photographs of it because it's on the back of a pickup, I presume.
And what is because it's not a world record breaker.
No, the world record is 1,247 kilograms, which is 2,749 pounds.
That's just
I
nuts.
think that's somebody in America that's got that one. But
amazing,
it is amazing. I mean, and they're saying that it takes them about 3 months to grow it, and they are 3 hours a day tending to these plants because, of course, they grow more than one, don't they? Then pick the biggest. But
what would you do with all that pumpkin flesh? I mean, do you think they'll actually use that, or is that just I don't know?
I don't think they will.
It,
yes, they do it just for winning. They're not going to eat it. It's because it's pumped full of lots of water and nutrients. It's probably not going to be particularly. But what they'll do is, because it's such a huge one, they will collect the seed off that, because it's all about trying to get the biggest, and they'll grow that seed next year and hope that it'll get a little bit bigger. They'll probably sell it. They may sell the seed as well. I mean, if the people that win the giant onion competitions will sell the seed for quite a lot of money. I mean, I remember many years ago when I ran the Harrogate flower shows, we used to have the heaviest onion competition in September, and that particular year it was won by a Nottinghamshire man, Peter Glazebrook, who I think we filmed in his garden many years ago, Sean, or I did, if you weren't with us. And I think at the time the onion was about £15, which was big. They're bigger than that now. This is going back 10, 12 years ago. And he won the world record. It was all verified, and at the show we had a German film crew filming it, and they wanted to buy his onion, and he wouldn't sell it to them. And they said, why won't you sell it? He said, because I will now grow this onion, collect the seed, and I can make a lot of money from the seed selling it to other large vegetable growers. And I asked the German film crew, why do you want the world's largest onion? And they said, we want to put it in a big jam jar full of vinegar and have the world's biggest pickled onion.
I love that. I thought it was going to be something done like they wanted it in the studio back in
No, they wanted to break another record. So yes, there you go. So it's big business.
It is.
Yeah, they
say it's a brutal sport.
So
it's
it's definitely big business. Yes.
Oh, it is. Yes.
Absolutely. It is. There you go, right. Okie dokie. Shall I do a few jobs then? Things that we can be doing in the garden.
There's quite a lot to do, isn't there?
There's a
It's
lot
that
to
tidy
do.
up time.
And
isn't it?
having been away at lots of shows, we've got to catch up. We were going to scarify our lawns, do a bit of lawn care, because the lawns aren't in the best of condition here. We're trying to improve them. We don't want bowling greens, but we want just decent lawns. And I was going to scarify them in September, but we were a little bit dry. But we've now had quite a bit of rain over the last week or so. So the grass has greened up, the ground's a bit softer. So sometime this week I'm going to scarify it, which is when you just basically rake the lawn with either a wire rake or you can use a mechanical scarifier, and it pulls out the dead material and any moss and what we call thatch, all the rubbish that builds up in the base. So that helps with aeration, it stimulates new growth. I'm going to do a bit of spiking.
Are we doing a video about
We
this?
will do a video about it, yeah. We'll do a bit of spiking, so either with a fork or if you've got a little spiker on a roller. Again, that just gets some air down to the roots and helps a little bit with surface drainage. And then it's a good idea to put an autumn feed on. An autumn feed is very different to a spring and summer feed because it's low in nitrogen. We don't want lots of lush growth through the winter. What we want are nutrients in it that will build up the root system to give us a really good root system for next year. So I'm going to be doing that in the next, hopefully this week, if we get a few fine days, get out there with Mrs. Fish and we'll do the lawn. Also a good time if you've got rambling roses. They're the ones that ramble and make lots of growth. Fantastic. Usually only flower once in the season, and rambling roses can be given a prune, and it's very simple. What you do is you cut out all the long stems that have had flowers on this year, so you'll probably have the remnants of the flowers on there, so you can cut those out. Leave them if they've got lovely attractive hips on. You can save those and do them later, but if they haven't got hips on, cut all the old shoots out, leave in the long new whippy growth and just tie those into a framework of trellis or some wire, so it just keeps the shape. Otherwise they just get overgrown. So you can do that now. And it's also apple harvest time. We saw some amazing ones at Malvern last week, apples. So if you've got apples in your garden, if you're not sure what time to pick them, just grab the fruit. I should have had an apple here, shouldn't I? Give it a gentle twist, and if it leaves the tree, then it's ready to pick, and then you can eat them or store them somewhere cool. If you've got to pull at it, really tug at it, then leave it for another week and try it again. But from now onwards, most apples will be ready within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
I went a bit early on my apples, and I took them off anyway, which they weren't ready, and they were very sour, and they made a really nice crumble with some sugar. But yeah, they were supposed to be dessert apples, and they weren't very desserty. So yeah, I learned from that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, they ripen better on the tree than if you pick them underripe. So it's always best to leave them till they're, and just taste one. If you like the taste of it, pick them.
Yeah. Now you mentioned rambling roses.
I
We did have a quick question about roses that came through YouTube. And they said that everything that they've read says that you shouldn't do any fall or autumn pruning so as not to spur the new growth. Instead, wait until the spring. Is there a rule of thumb about this, such as waiting until the first frost to prune? But he'd really like to tidy up before the heavy winter.
Okay, I mean, certainly, obviously that sounds like it's somebody out in America, doesn't it? Referring to the autumn as the fall. I mean, you don't have to prune in the autumn or the fall, but sometimes I like to do it because if a rose bush is big and we get a windy winter, it will blow around and that can rock the roots and it can sort of make it unstable in the ground. So that's the main reason I do it. I wouldn't do it now, although we're pruning the rambling rose now. I wouldn't actually prune my bush roses down by half or a third until probably when it's really cooled down, because if you do it now, then they will regrow and you'll get soft growth. So you've got to wait almost wherever you live until it's late autumn, but before the really cold weather of winter kicks in. So I normally do it where we are in the UK around about mid to late November. Try and do it this side of Christmas certainly, but I don't know how cold it is where you live, I'm afraid. So
it was maybe a video that we did last year.
It would have been,
a little bit later on in the autumn.
Yeah, and it's just a reminder to anyone asking questions, please do tell us where you are in the world, and that helps us just work out if we can answer it in the same way as we would do here, I suppose, or treat it in the same way as we would do here. I'm saying that for you, Martin, but I guess that's the truth, isn't it?
It does, yes.
It does
exactly,
help.
yeah.
It does help.
Climate's
Good stuff.
changed. Lovely. I think that's about it then, isn't it, for this week?
I think it probably is.
Yeah, next
We've
week we're going to
rambled
be
like
talking
the roses.
exactly. Next week we're going to have a chat with John Wheatley, who is who we mentioned earlier. He's well known in the horticultural trade. He's got a very, very interesting story about his life. So we'll have a catch up with him.
I can get back to my marrow cake though. Do check out our videos, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.